at Hopkins, where he was my professor. And never have I had an instructor who was so enraptured by the English language and absolutely delighted by it. He used to sort of get in giggle fits sometimes when we were reading Thomas Pynchon. And it just amazed me that this man would share like his delight with the language. I never would have been as moved by John Ashbery or as amused by Pynchon, if not for Joe's giddy delight. Joe's first book, Someone Else's Name, which is available here for sale for only $5. Richard Wilbur said of the book that it is full of stunning performances, each poem infused with wit, feeling, and humanity. And I think that you'll be delighted to witness Joe's performance tonight.
Thank you, Tracy. Can you all hear me okay? Thanks for coming. I'll start with a poem called The Last Book. Such things were treasured objects long ago, bound in calf's leather, framed by marble boards, arranged by code and capitals, prized hoards of variable, corner, and folio. And now, downloaded, Xeroxed, put on tape to quicken the commute's redundant trip. Whole herbs shrink onto a microchip, and volume after volume lose their shape. Who'll be the very last human to hold one of these curious relics in his hands and think of vanished rivers, vanished birds, and wonder why, in distant times and lands, we made such settings for the tales we told, and placed such binding value on our words. You might detect in that poem the ambivalence toward progress of the technologically challenged. That's probably audible in this one as well, which is called Trajectory. Who were we back before the whole world changed? The person jabbering in the street alone was certainly deranged. Now he's just on the phone. Perhaps he's trading futures, but with whom? Can I trade mine or ours? But I'm a pod. My palm is piloted. Have we been saved or Pontius Pilate? What else beside our numbers got exchanged? What records pirated? What happened to our safety zone? Where there's a great reckoning, there's little room, even for awe. With all the shining dials set on Zoom, what fave new world is beckoning? What artificial God with mega memory who does not nod? I can't not go along. Lord knows I've tried to keep myself from getting up to speed on this text message ride. In word, if not indeed in correspondence, then at least in verse, I felt the antiquated urge to try. Way back before we let happen things that hadn't happened yet, who thought we'd choose vehicular suicide? And now, caught in the net, attached, we tell ourselves we're free. The crashes we don't mention. There's no reverse, no hidden byway. Will we be masters of the universe, grand techno-wizards, uber-mentioned, singing I did it my way? Or roadkill on the information highway? Those poems are from my next book, Identity Theft, which is due out early next year. I will do one poem from Someone Else's Name. This poem is based in part on the misadventures of a fellow out in California. You may have heard of him, named Larry Walters. who attached a flotilla of helium balloons to a lawn chair and shot up 15,000 feet into the jet lanes above Los Angeles, narrowly escaping with his life. He named his craft Inspiration One, which inspired this poem entitled Air Larry. When the idea came, it seemed, at best, a dicey thing to do. You rig your vehicle, give it a name, straighten a line or two, then, confident you've given it your best, if not that it will carry you along, you put it to the test, and it just takes off, lifting over the trees and up the sky, easy as you please, till soon you're really high. Your neighborhood, turned miniature, is gone, and you wonder how, up here all alone, to get the hell down, now that the transcendental imagination has proven it can indeed surpass your wildest expectation and raise you higher than you need or want to go. For now that you are there, all you know is how little you know, and that here in the upper air it is very cold, a disabling extremity your clumsy calculations should have foretold, and triggering all your anxiety, you hear, then see, roaring across the sky as dots in the distance streak into form, the gargantuan crowd come cruising by, perfectly uniform, built for speed and altitude, so effortless in shouting sound itself that next to them, your vehicle looks crude and fatally flawed, just like yourself, painfully ill-equipped to play the hero, and actually beginning to freeze to death at a temperature far below zero, where the thin air burns each breath. And you realize you must, not a moment too soon, jettison all original intent and pop your own balloon to undertake the perilous descent. I'll read the 3 short poems that the editors of Smartish Pace were kind enough to publish in issue 14. The first one is called To False Spring. You've tricked the flowers out, so now they die. These are the signs of deity as premature arrival. These are the lies. To a common house sparrow, drab avatar of all that's ordinary, dull uniformed, monotonous in song, if it is song, low flying, mostly hopping along the ground. You're not immortal or incomparable, but still my heart aches in a minor key for what you are. To the wind, lift all the summer's green epiphanies, yellow to rust and fire, and blow them away, O Arctic, O Canadian, scurry them into troughs for the underworld. I'm now going to risk what's usually a bad idea, a topical poem. It's a poem is a ballade, and I've taken the refrain line from a poem by Sir Thomas Wyatt. It's Wyatt's sonnet that begins, "My galley charged with forgetfulness," and ends with the line, "And I remain despairing of the port." That's the line I used, the last one. Wyatt's poem is itself, of course, a translation of a poem by the Italian poet Petrarch. And in Petrarch's poem and Wyatt's poem, the figure of the ship lost at sea is the figure of the lover buffeted by the displeasure of the beloved. But Petrarch's poem is in part based on a still older poem by the Latin poet Horace, which is in turn based on a yet older poem by the Greek poet Anacreon, which uses the same figure, but in those poems, the classical poems, The figure of the ship lost at sea in storms stands for the ship of state engaged in dubious wars. This is called To the Republic. What have we done who once were hailed protectors of humanity and celebrated where we sailed, whose freedom set the ages free to scheme what better states could be? We're symbols of a deadlier sort, bullies despised for cruelty, and I remain despairing of the poor. We should have known what war entailed. Our fool imperial fantasy tried to command the world and failed. The consequences we now see: explosions of pure misery, with 500,000 lives cut short by death throes of democracy. And I remain despairing of the poor. Where were the leaders who should have railed against such blatant idiocy before we launched this shit? They failed. Torture and illegality have turned our country's policy. To import oil, we must export American hypocrisy. And I remain despairing of the poor. The winds blow by. History breaks empires on the rocks for sport. Our sails are rent. We're lost at sea. And I remain despairing of the poor. And I'll do just one more. This is a poem that's addressed actually to a tortoise, a giant Aldebaran tortoise who died recently in a zoo in Calcutta. This tortoise, we think, was at least 250 years old, which made it the oldest sentient thing on the planet, as far as we know. And it had actually, at one time, been the pet of Lord Clive of India, one of the founders of the British Empire. So the tortoise actually outlived the British Empire. This is called To an Aldebaran Tortoise, dead at 250. The races of the swift, who swiftly come and go like fads or pop stars, trending out of sight almost before we see them, given their gift of getting something right for 15 minutes or so. The one-hit wonders, overnight sensations, pet rocks and salad shooters, or former latest software innovations for Pleistocene computers, seem briefer next to you. Notice the only one, Adventure, oldest sentient thing alive by 80 years or more. A tortoise who was once the pet of Clive of India. That sun set eons since, in veils of saffron dye, as giant Aldebaran doubtless cast a cold colonial pride on many a vanished man. Not least that lapsed grandee, the prototypical nabob and potentate, big gun for hire to profit the East India Company, that junkie, thief, and liar who owns you, whose steep fall, spectacularly public, stunned the nation, who did confess, when tried, astonishment at his own moderation, ending a suicide. Now you, whose lifespan spanned Mozart and Bird and Cage, Wordsworth and Motherwell, Turner and Keats, plus Keane and Keaton, Kierkegaard and Rand, forests of old-growth trees, the whole industrial age, isms galore, old worlds and new world orders, epochs and episteme, innumerable maps redrawing borders for botched colonial schemes, antediluvian, lugging your great domed shell for centuries, have crossed the finish line alone, one of a kind. Small things began your terminal decline. For months you've not been well. A crack in your armor festered, gnawed by rats. Your liver failed. You, too, succumbed to time, with no more caveats, dead at the Alapur Zoo. Still, your trajectory from Coraline Atoll to editorial encomium upon your death implies a larger story of how you came to be a star of sorts in the role of figure for time itself, through silent, sheer endurance of life stages on a vast Siberian scale, year after year, bridging the distant ages. We fight, we cry, we laugh. You turn your head and blink, and we are gone, or were. For now you are no longer living, breathing chronograph, or Vishnu's avatar, the second, I think, Colonel, the tortoise, sent to Earth to plumb the bottom of the ocean for what we lost, the cold depths, phonic, dumb, a whole world in slow motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, Yao, and Amber for reading tonight. That was wonderful. And thank you also, I forgot in my initial introduction to thank Tommy O'Day for his generosity tonight and for rolling the keg in here and for manning the door. And stick around for the bands. The first band up is going to be Jean Louise, and then Davey G on the keyboard, and then Mr. Moxon, all that starting soon. Thank you.